roof garden company based mainly in Europe. They have 150K customers, 5K partners, and 10 regional offices across Europe. And they have plans to expand into the United States and Canada. And there's also to note here that they currently have 10 legacy CRM systems that will need to be migrated onto Salesforce, and a mix of in-house applications and other external services that will need to be integrated into the system. So risk and assumptions, I assume that they have an unlimited budget, or the budget is not constrained. Then on the technical side, I've assumed that the specialty plants application is web-based. So let's talk a bit about the requirements. We've got a mix of different user groups. We've got marketeers. The marketeers attend events and gather leads to these events. They qualify these leads and then pass them on to sales. And the imminent and high value projects need to be flagged. We've got sales, two types of sales groups. We've got sales representatives and the strategic sales teams. The sales representatives are regional sales, and the strategic sales team are cross-region sales. And there's some requirements that the sales representatives get assigned to the same client when the client comes back for repeat business. Notifications get sent out. When they go on site, that they need to check into via a mobile application. And at that point in time, when the project is approved, a project record is automatically created. And then we've got the design consultants who actually plan and design the rooftop systems. And they share a variety of documents with the clients, including plans and schematics. They reserve plans through the specialty plans system. They share the schedule, installation budget, and installation plans with the customer. They also interact with government agencies by submitting installation permits to the government agencies. This can be rejected or approved by the government agencies, and that they also need an ability to then reapply for permits. And then we've got the internal management team that provide oversight across all the sales and marketeers. And then we've got two external groups, the partners in the picture here. And we've got the installers themselves who actually do the work. So they'll need to purchase plans, deliver the projects, and also have a requirement to view the schematics on site in offline capacity. Above the installers, then we've got the installation managers, and they just provide oversight across the installers and the projects that they work on. And the last group of users then is the customers themselves, that they receive and approve the estimates during the kind of sales cycle. And they receive notification on projects when they're created and of the design consultant assigned to the project. They receive and approve the schedule, installation budget, and installation plans, sign off the project, they receive an invoice, and they also have the ability to create issues through a portal and also pay for the installation through the portal. Non-functional requirements. There are integrations with a couple of systems here. We've got an in-house billing system where invoices and payments are managed. There's a learning management system where the internal users can take training courses and have the courses that they've completed then fed back to Salesforce. So the design consultants then can take a look at the courses that the people have completed. We've also got the specialty plants application that is basically a platform that shows specialty plants from a number of suppliers. And requirements here that if plants are reserved, that they shouldn't be shown to the design consultants when they're booking plants. And similarly, then when a project is cancelled or a plant is itself cancelled or removed from a project, that they are shown in the results there. Then we've also got the government agencies. The installation permits are sent to numerous local government agencies. When they are declined or accepted, the status of the permit should be automatically updated. And we've also got the payment portal where customers can pay for the installation. There's a requirement that the internal systems all be enabled via single sign-on. They have an internal LDAP system for the internal users, and there's some requirements there for social login for the external users. Then in terms of data migration, there are 10 legacy CRM systems that need to be migrated to Salesforce. And for mobile, there is the offline access along with some kind of geolocation requirements as well. So onto the solution architecture. Just make this a little bit bigger here. So on the left-hand side here, we've got Salesforce. Within Salesforce, then there's like a payment application that would be an app exchange application that would be installed into the system, and that would handle the payments and remove any confidential or financial data being stored within Salesforce. Up in the top right, then we've got the learning management system. So this would feed back into Salesforce the training courses that have been completed by the internal users. This would go through an enterprise service bus such as MuleSoft, and this would be a request and reply pattern, as that there are some real-time requirements there to view this the completed training data within Salesforce. Below that, we have the billing system. We have invoices and payments being generated within Salesforce that will need to be reflected back into the billing system and managed there. So that this would be achieved through outbound messaging. And we'll go into the ESB and then into the billing system via its HTTP interface. The specialty plants application will be integrated through Canvas. This will provide the ability to surface the application within Salesforce and just sync the specific plants that are booked to a project, and then also to free up plants if they are then cancelled from the project. So this would be a relatively kind of complex Canvas integration with Salesforce. And then in the bottom right there, we've got the government agencies. We would have the permit applications sent from Salesforce via outbound messaging, and then MuleSoft to handle the interaction with the government agencies via whatever APIs the government agencies expose. The response then would be request and reply to a kind of public API that would be exposed to MuleSoft and then back into Salesforce. And one thing missing from this diagram is the single sign-on integration. So there's an internal LDAP system that would be integrated via Active Directory Federation services and would integrate with Salesforce via SAML. So the Active Directory Federation services would need to be accessible from the external web. And just some detail there around the particular integrations. I kind of covered these as I was discussing the diagram there. It's got these specific methods there of integration. Then in terms of data model, it's a fairly restricted visibility. There are within the internal users, there's restricted access on most objects there. So some of this is owner-based via the role hierarchy or criteria-based sharing. Essentially, everything is private in the internal OWD and the external OWD. Okay, onto the data model here. So we've got up in the top middle there, we've got accounts then to model the clients themselves. Underneath accounts, we'll have the specific people, i.e. the contacts within the company. For the marketeers, they'll be running event-based campaigns and gathering leads from these events. So we've got campaigns and campaign members. We've also got opportunities for the sales cycle. So when a design consultant or a sales representative goes on site, they'll be working primarily off an opportunity. Once the opportunity is signed off by the client, once they approve the project, an order will be created. And so prior to that, the client will be provided an estimate, i.e. a quote. When they approve that quote, then an order is created off the back of the opportunity. The opportunity will have opportunity line items, each consisting of a price book entry reflecting a product. On the order side, then there's the invoices that get sent to the customer, and to kind of satisfy the sharing requirements, then this will be a master detail relationship. And for each invoice, that there'll also be a payment, and this will also be a master detail relationship. And for the government agency installation permits, then we'll also have a installation permit custom object hanging off the order object in a master detail relationship. And the government agencies, details of this will get sent to government agencies, and then the response to that installation application, it will be fed back to particular fields within this object here. So in terms of custom and standard objects, these are all, this kind of L bit of the hierarchy here is all standard. Account, order, campaign member, contact, all standard. An invoice, payment, and installation permit would be custom. Then just over on the right-hand side here, we've got the training courses. These are for the internal users. We have the training courses themselves, and then a junction object that will indicate the completed courses for each user. And these would have master detail relationships to the user and the training course. Okay, onto the actors and data access. So we've got the marketeers at the top there. There's no specific requirements for these guys. I think it would be owner-based sharing. Essentially, that they would just see all leads, or it'd be based off the road hierarchy. The sales representatives would have owner-based sharing. That they'd see the projects, opportunities within their region. For the strategic sales team, there's a requirement that they only see projects that are marked as strategic or potential projects. So there'll be opportunities but marked as strategic. So there'll be criteria-based sharing involved there. And for the design consultants, we will also have owner-based sharing, so that they see the applications that they're assigned to. And potentially, actually, we don't need the criteria-based sharing there. Just having another look at the specific requirements here. So that is actually potentially just owner-based sharing via the role hierarchy. The GRS managers then should actually be, let me just change this on the fly. It would just be owner-based sharing. I said that they need regional access to the data. Then the partners, we've got the installers themselves and the installation managers above them. This would be owner-based sharing via partner roles. And then for the customers, we've got a high volume of customers there. This should be to sharing sets in the customer community. And just to highlight the licenses there, all the internal users essentially on Sales Cloud, the installers are on the partner community, and the customers are on the customer community. And there's no requirement for the customer community plus in this case. Just on to design considerations. There's a relatively large amount of data will accrue in the projects themselves and the plants. So we've got 400 projects per month with 5K plants. So we'd want to archive this data at some point. The plants have a 60-day guarantee. So at some point post that guarantee, that they can be archived to either big objects or external system. There's also a requirement for internationalization, so we would enable the translation workbench. There weren't specific requirements around currency, but presumably as they operate throughout Europe and have plans to expand into Canada and the United States, we'd also have multi-currency. Okay, so let's talk about some of the specific design considerations and solutions here based on the requirements in the scenario. We have the marketeers there. who will be doing lead generation to events. So they would work with leads, campaign members, and use lead conversion then to pass these off to the internal sales teams. There's also some requirements there that they receive notifications if a lead hasn't been qualified within a certain amount of time, or if it's a certain budget or priority, and this would be achieved through time-based workflow. But for the sales representatives and the strategic sales teams, they need to be assigned to recurring clients. So this should be done through the process builder. There's also a requirement that they can kind of check into a site and gather some geolocation data. And this would be via a HTML5 page in Salesforce 1. And they'll, based on that site visit, they'll be need to kind of upload photos and videos to the system. So these can just be uploaded as attachments in the Salesforce 1 application. And so similarly for the automatic creation of the project record, but once the client approves the quote, it's be done through Process Builder as well. For the design consultants then, they need to share plans and schematics with the client. These can be emailed out, stored in Salesforce as files related to the record they're working on, the opportunity in some cases, the order in others. And this would be potentially before the customer is actually registered, potentially before they're registered on the portal. These will be stored as Salesforce files and then emailed out to the customer. And similarly with the schedule, installation budget, and installation plans. For the installation permit application, there's a requirement that if the permit application is rejected, that they can reapply for the permit, but use the same tracking number. So for this, then a custom quick action can kind of clone that permit record and create a new application and still have the existing tracker number in that application. For the GRS managers, there are not many requirements there. Just provide oversight over the sales and marketing teams. Then for the external users, or the installers, they'll need to purchase plans, deliver projects, and have a requirement to view the schematics offline. And for this, it's probably actually a custom mobile application on tablet would be a solution, or potentially they could just download the schematics, but a more optimal solution would be custom mobile apps. So let me just put that here. The installation managers then just provide oversight of the installers. No major requirements there than the sharing that I've discussed. And then onto the customers. So they receive and approve an estimate. So they can achieve this via approval via email. The estimate can get sent out, but potentially via a process builder based on status change. They also receive notifications of the project creation. Again, that could be a process builder. And similarly for the receipt and approval of schedule, installation budget, and installation plans, sign off the project, and then paying and creating issues through the portal then will be mixed with that exchange payment application and cases exposed to the customer community. Is there anything specific I haven't covered here? So I think I'll talk a bit more about data migration in the next slide. For data migration, we've got 10 legacy CRM systems that need to be migrated onto Salesforce. We don't have details of the volumes, but I guess we can kind of infer them from the number of clients I was given, which is 150K customers. So not a huge number of data. We wouldn't necessarily consider that a large data volume. We can use an ETL tool such as Talent Open Studio to migrate the data into Salesforce. There's potentially a risk of duplication across the various systems, which need to be managed through the data migration process. Also, the schema and the data model used in these systems is potentially quite different, but need to be standardized. There will be most likely quite a lot of incorrect or potentially dirty data in these systems, as they're legacy systems. The data should be kind of cleaned up as much as possible, but before migration, but by the users in some cases, or there'll be some kind of vetting of that data, some kind of eyeballing of that data once it's cleaned by the users during the process. So let me talk a bit about the process release management and delivery. So in terms of the governance structure for the project, we would have executive sponsors to make high decisions on escalated issues, and to kind of unblock the project at certain points during its lifetime. We would have the business sponsors within the green roof systems, and business representatives who we would interface with primarily to gather requirements, get requirements signed off, and involved in the day-to-day running of the project, including UAT and testing. We have a steerco of executive staff to guide the project, make sure it's on track, and to take on some of those decisions and unblock them internally. We would also have a design authority then to make the decisions around the high-level solution design, and to kind of bring in make decisions on some of the integration architecture, some of the high-level solution decisions there. And we'd also have a project management office then to manage the project itself, and make sure it's on track and on budget. In terms of development, we have a couple of different streams. We've got the internal development of Salesforce that could potentially be broken up into the kind of core internal bits of sales and marketing, and potentially different streams to manage the communities. Then we've also got the integration work. We kind of see this breaking down into the Salesforce resources who work on the integration, the ESB or the MuleSoft resources, and potentially kind of resources then working on the internal systems themselves. In terms of development then, we would have a source control, potentially a project this size, we recommend using continuous integration. So there's a single source of truth for code, especially as it relates to the external systems themselves and the integrations. In terms of environments, then we would have the development on the Salesforce side. We would have developers working in isolation in their own developer sandboxes, then checking into source control, having that be built out to a continuous integration sandbox via the continuous integration. Jenkins is a good solution there. From the continuous integration environment, it would get up to the higher orgs via the build system. The developers will be working in a dev branch. At the end of a sprint, we create a release branch and have that promoted then from SIT to UAT and then production. So let me talk a little bit about testing to mitigate the risk of breakages and functionality not working. Or other issues. We would test a couple of different aspects. So there's a large data migration effort here. We've got 10 separate systems. That's a lot of disparate systems to migrate into a single system. There'll be, I guess that this is a project risk, is that there's essentially 10 user groups with potentially very different views of that data. So getting them to kind of test and validate the migration will be difficult. So the kind of the mapping docs from their systems to Salesforce, the extraction criteria, and any the data cleansing rules will have to be communicated very clearly to those users to get them through the testing, i.e. the data migration UAT. There'll also be the functional testing in Salesforce primarily. This would be based on the requirements will be gathered in a tracking system such as Jira, and test scripts generated from those requirements. So there's a traceability from a specific feature that's checked into to the repository, i.e. Git. At that point in time, it's stamped with the ticket number. Then we have the the actual requirement, the ticket number in Jira, and then from that we create the test scripts. So we can link the actual work done to the requirement to the test, and have a full traceability of all those requirements and the result in testing. Then there's also a relatively large amount of integrations work to be tested. This would be tested in two areas: the system integration testing, and then also kind of end-to-end testing in the UAT environment. So we'd look to do volume testing in SIT, and overall operation with the other systems. You see if I have missed anything out here, I want to cover again. I think I will leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Hang on, let me just pause. All right, you still have 8 minutes, 27 seconds left.
8 minutes, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I am going to add to our Q&A of 40 minutes. Okay, hang on, just let me do the timer. 8:27. Okay, started now. All right. So are we starting the Q&A? Daniel, do you want to?
Yeah. Yeah. Hi, Mike. I have some questions regarding authentication.
Sure.
By the way, great presentation. Can you talk about how the authentication occurs for the various systems, and if you can talk about what best practices would you recommend regarding security, like how to secure the integrations on those systems, and which ones would you think are more concerning regarding the information of the customers? Like which ones are more critical to secure?
Sure. Let's see. So for the single sign-on, I'm sure I missed that from the diagram. They have an internal LDAP system. So to integrate this with Salesforce, we would place ADFS on top of it, and that would work. Integrate then with just standard single sign-on within Salesforce. So that this is secured by a certificate that would be issued by the by ADFS, and integrate via SAML. So I guess in most of the cases, then, or some of the cases that they are users will go to the external systems themselves, potentially like the training application. So that would be you're going from the service provider and authenticating with the identity provider, Salesforce, So the service provider based authentication. So the user would go to the system. They'd be redirected to a login page in Salesforce. Log in there, and then Salesforce would send back a SAML assertion to the application, and from this and the certificate that's passed back, the application knows that this assertion has come from Salesforce, and that the user is indeed a valid Salesforce user. Does that answer your first question?
So I'm not clear how, for example, can you go to one of the slides that talk about integration via outbound methods?
The outbound messaging, sure.
Yeah.
Oops, Daisy.
So there are some systems that you recommend integrating via outbound message. So how's the authentication? How the IDP plays a role when you authenticate via outbound message?
Sure. Yeah. So let's look at the billing system here. So for this integration, we wouldn't necessarily use single sign-on, but we'd have like a integration user that would authenticate with the billing system. And then in terms of the security of the transport, we would implement two-way SSL as the billing system. I'll just check the requirements here. Has a HTTPS interface, I believe. And I guess that's an assumption I'd make there, that the billing system can support two-way SSL.
Okay. And with regards to the government agencies, I guess that's the last question. There was a requirement. There was a part of the requirement that mentioned that the response from the government agencies may take up to 6 days or a week, I believe. How would the government agency connect back to Salesforce if that time has elapsed?
Sure. So this will be all asynchronous. So when we submit the permit to the government agency, yeah, actually, now that I think of it, I just take a closer look at the requirements. I assume that when we submit the request to the government agency, that the government agency would pass back some kind of identifier. Just take a quick look at the requirements here. But there'd be an exchange of some ID there, either passed back by the government agency itself, or passed when we submit the initial request, and then they would send their response based on that ID.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay. with regards to the licenses, can you go to the slide that you talk about licenses?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Just one quick question. Um,
Sorry, just take a quick look at the requirements on the government agency there.
Other government agencies. Yeah, it's on page 6.
Yeah, it says that the tracking number is in the response to the permit application. So
yeah,
I think we'd have to kind of pass them with some internal ID for my reading of that. Okay, so the licenses, yeah.
yeah. So regarding the licenses, you had mentioned partner community for installers. Mm-hmm. What's your consideration for that, for suggesting that license?
There's role-based sharing there. There's a hierarchy within the installers. We've got the installers themselves, and then managers above them.
Mm-hmm.
They will be installers that are working with in terms of the data model. Let's pop up in the data model here. And they'll need to see the accounts, contacts, the order, and the I think that's pretty much it. But potentially, I don't think that there are any specific requirements around the opportunity, the sales phase of the process. But looking at those objects there. So in terms of kind of role-based sharing, the other option would be customer community plus, but really that they're more kind of partners in this case, and kind of interacting with or the sales objects.
And the community itself, what kind of template would you use for these users?
See, potentially the Napoli template, which has kind of a service-based aspects, but there aren't kind of specific requirements around the UI there, so it's not kind of clear if it can be kind of custom skin or they work. But I think that Napoli would be a good choice.
Okay. One of the considerations you made around mobile, when you talked about the installers using their tablet, you recommended using a custom mobile application. You initially had recommended Salesforce 1. Can you talk about like what was your thought process for recommending that? Like,
sure. Yeah.
What did you consider?
So Salesforce 1 does have some offline capabilities, but it's more based on how recently you viewed a record. So potentially that may not work that well in this case. They may end up in a customer site where they haven't managed to log in and take a look at that specific record. So if we have a custom mobile application, we'd be able to manage that offline syncing more kind of programmatically based on kind of projects that the the user is assigned to, rather than whether or not they actually happen to have an opportunity to look at the specific record.
Okay. Okay. And so the application itself, like a custom application that's built for specifically for tablets, how would you distribute it? How do installers install that application in their tablets?
So as it is a custom application, rather than based on the Salesforce one, it'll be via the App Store, the Apple or the Google App Stores.
Okay. Do they authenticate using some kind of some special credentials, or do you allow them to register directly? That part wasn't clear. I don't think it was part of the requirements, but
this is the
installers. The installers. Yeah.
So the installers would be provisioned through the partner portal. I don't see any kind of requirements around self-registration or anything like that. So I think that there'd be an internal team that would provision them, and
okay.
and they just use those credentials to log into the mobile application.
Okay. So talking about the account and contact data model, I think part of the requirements mentioned briefly that there were two types of customers: individuals and large companies that own multiple buildings in different regions. What kind of classification would you put in place for that?
So actually, I think I missed that in my design, but we could, for the individuals, we could use the person accounts. So we don't have any requirements to break the sharing between account and contact here, as you might have in very restricted sharing models. So in this case, it would be applicable for person accounts to be used to model the individual clients, and then standard account and contact for the corporate clients.
Okay.
Can I question from me?
Yeah.
Oh, actually, Daniel, have you done? If not, I'll.
No, I have more questions, but yeah, if you can ask your questions, then I'll have some more time to think better.
Sure.
What to ask.
I have questions. If you go back to your so your architecture diagram. Yeah. Can you explain what is, you mentioned outbound messaging to a government agency? I think Daniel asked before. Can you explain? Can you elaborate how does how many records do you send at a time? In fact, can you describe how does the permit get sent to government agency? The process.
Sure. Yeah. So this would be via outbound messaging, as we're saying. I think that there tends to be some kind of status or button on the permit application page that would update a field and trigger the workflow to send the outbound message to trigger an outbound message to the government agencies. So the government agencies are going to have inevitably very different APIs. So MuleSoft would translate the format and the protocol of the permit being sent from Salesforce to whatever is on the government agency side. In terms of the actual kind of number of permits that are sent at a time, that would really depend on the number of permits that are being placed into this status, the send status to in Salesforce. But these would get batched up depending on the volume in a particular time period in Salesforce, so that when they hit MuleSoft, they'll be potentially batched up depending on the volume. And then from MuleSoft, then that it would look at the data in the permit, like there'd be some location information, like there'd be a country stamped on the permit object, and that would route it to the appropriate government agency in that region. Does that answer your question?
Yes, partially. Where is the up happening? Is it in Salesforce or is it in MuleSoft?
So where is what happening?
Where is the batching up of records? Is it happening in Salesforce or
in Salesforce?
Okay, thank you. Another question on for the specialty plans. Can you describe how does a user access the specialty plan from Salesforce?
So the specialty plans application is the assumption there is that it's a web-based application, and this would be surfaced in Salesforce as a Canvas app. So we provide a kind of seamless experience to the user. We have the user would be kind of seamlessly logged in, and it'd be surfaced in Salesforce with the same kind of Salesforce styles. So it looks just like a that is part of the Salesforce application. So through the Canvas API, then there would be a bit of interaction there to handle the booking of plans. So if a user books a plan for a specific project, we need to through the Canvas API reflect that back into Salesforce and attach that plan to the opportunity that the user is working on, the opportunity line items, and similarly then, and now that I think that potentially this is, we also need to handle the plant being cancelled within Salesforce. So I guess there are two. So now I think that actually we probably want to handle scenarios where that plant is kind of cancelled or removed from an opportunity or an order potentially outside that Canvas app. If that's the case, then we'd have a integration from Salesforce back to the specialty plans application, but potentially through MuleSoft as well, outbound messaging to let these actually let me see.
What would be the integration pattern?
Actually, yeah. Sorry. Actually, no, think about it a bit more. I think yeah, the specialty plans application doesn't need to know whether or not something is booked in a project in Salesforce. So all that data would just be stored in Salesforce. So if a plant is booked for a project, then that'll be created in the data model in Salesforce. Then through the Canvas integration, we'd kind of look at the data coming back from the specialty plants application, cross-check that against booked plants in Salesforce, and then remove any booked plants from the screen that's displayed to the user. And then if a plant is cancelled or removed from the project, that just happens in Salesforce, but through the Canvas integration, we would just make that plant available again in the UI.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, can you explain about the custom mobile application you have recommended? How is the data going to be stored in the custom mobile? Sorry, first question, how does the user log in to the custom mobile application?
Sure. So they would log in to the mobile application just using their regular Salesforce credentials. Salesforce is the Salesforce isn't the identity provider. They log in through their I think I misspoke earlier on, but when I said the Salesforce, what was the IDP? Sorry, it's the LDAP system is the identity provider here. So they would enter in their LDAP credentials and be logged in via single sign-on to the mobile application. Does that answer your question around SSO?
How does the mobile app know that this user is a valid user?
So the application would, through the single sign-on, it would be when they go into the application. And sorry, I realized now I misspoke earlier on when being asked a similar question around SSO. They'd be presented with an ADFS login screen. They would enter in their LDAP credentials there. They would then be sent from ADFS to the LDAP system, and they get redirected then with a SAML assertion that would get passed via the browser, the mobile application to Salesforce, and Salesforce will look at that assertion and recognize that the user is a valid user.
Okay, thank you. Second question, how do you plan to store data in the custom mobile application?
Sure. So the mobile SDK has a lot of functionality for creating offline storage via the kind of soups. These are all stored on the application in an encrypted store. It's 256-bit AES. So we would also kind of recommend, so the store is encrypted, and that's a pretty good measure there. But we'd also kind of recommend that there be extra kind of security on the device itself. Either using like mobile device management or other systems, or for some of the functionality that Salesforce provides to kind of deactivate the devices, and if it is recognized that the device has been stolen, and that the I guess another measure there is that the user themselves can be kind of deactivated and deprovisioned to the LDAP system.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Can you go to the data model? I think you have an ERD diagram.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a payment object. Can you explain what is the payment object storing and what is it for?
So this is just tracked the fact that a customer has made a payment. So this will be managed to the payment application, which would be an app exchange application. So this wouldn't store any financial information, like i.e. credit card information or anything like that. That'll be managed to the payment application via a payment gateway, and it would just record the fact of the payment, that the customer has made a payment of a specific amount, and other information about that, the time it was paid, and potentially payment method and some other data, but no sensitive financial information would be stored in it.
Okay, thank you. Requirement number 3.2 on page 7. Yeah, can you explain how do you address this requirement?
So this GRS would like to provide customers with access to an online portal to pay invoices online and view history of paid invoices. So the payment application itself would need to be exposed to the customer portal. It would actually manage the handling the financial information, like credit card information, PayPal, or whatever else it supports. The payment record then will be created by the payment system. So that kind of part of the model is kind of owned by this external payment application, rather than kind of created by logic within the Salesforce itself or the implementation.
So payment reside in Salesforce or another system?
So could you repeat that?
So does the payment records reside? Where does the payment records reside?
So these would be like the sensitive information would be outside of Salesforce, or kind of managed by that payment application.
Okay, thank you.
Would be PTI compliant.
Okay, let's go on to just a last few. On this diagram, can you explain which are the objects are exposed on the communities for customers?
Sure. So I think so for the customer community, we'd have the account object and the contact object representing the client themselves, and that would also include personal accounts for the individual clients. We'd also have the order, I believe, there'd be certain data on the order that they would look at, although off the top of my head, I don't remember specific requirements around that. Then the invoices and the payments then, that with requirements for them to look at. And there are, they'll need to see the installation permit, or at least have it kind of sent to them via email. So it kind of makes sense to have this exposed to the portal as well. In terms of the partners, the installers themselves, they would see the account object, the contact object, so they can contact the right person when they go on site, and all that kind of stuff. They would be working with the order itself. They're not really involved in the sales portion of the process. So you'll see the order, and now that I think would actually, we wouldn't want to have master detail relationships here in this model, because we probably wouldn't want the installers to see the invoice and payment stuff. So in that case, we would use sharing sets for the customers, so they can see this part of the model, the invoice and the payment, and the partners then would have owner-based sharing, and just see the order itself, account and contact.
Okay, thank you. I think last question.
And actually, also some product information around the plan, so there'd be an order line item linking to entries here, so they can take a look at the plans involved in the installation.
Cool, thank you. Last question. Page 8, reporting requirements for 1, 2, and 3. Can you explain how do you address them,
Sure.
please?
So for the first requirement there, design consultants would like to see an ad hoc report that shows the installers in their region who've completed certain training courses. This could be done via standard Salesforce reporting, with a summary report of installers who'd be users, linked to training courses, and then filtered by the region of the installer. So it'd be so that the region would be, I suppose, on the account record. So it'd be contact to user to training course, with some kind of parent-child fields brought into that report to support the filtering.
Number 2?
Yeah. Number 2 then, GRS managers would like to see a monthly roll-up of revenue for their region and status of associated green roof projects. So for the revenue, we base this off the opportunities and in a particular status. So we get the region of the account related to the opportunity, and the status of the projects would be so the project would be order. So this actually be account to order, account and order essentially, with the region filtered on the account address information and the status on the order object.
Okay, so they are standard Salesforce reports, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Number 2.
Actually, I think that it's probably more appropriate to be status of agreement. I think that that's more appropriate that that's based off opportunities. I'm assuming the status is one based on opportunity status there.
Okay. How about thanks? How about the last requirement?
Installers would like to run a report that includes the specialty plans that have been reserved for the installation they are assigned to. So this would be orders, order line items, and price book entries.
Okay, thank you. We have 9 minutes left. Daniel, do you have any more questions?
I don't have any questions.
Okay.
Not really.
I actually still have. If you are okay, I'm gonna ask.
Great, yeah.
For requirement on data migration, number 2, page 7.
Let's take a look at that.
How would you address that?
The GRS would like a recommendation for system of record for customer demographic data. So there will be GDPR requirements around demographic data. Probably a bit more restrictive since the scenario was written, but and Salesforce can potentially could house this data. As we're looking at the sharing model, it's pretty restricted and private. There's the new functionality in Salesforce to handle the GDPR data. So it might be a good use case for it. But in this case, we probably want to restrict access of that data to more kind of select group of users. It doesn't specify who those users should be in the requirements, but that would put there'd be additional sharing considerations around the data should it be stored in Salesforce.